YouTube! S-Force is here, and it is top tier. Hi, it's your boy Sean Matrai. Gonna do a new video on S-Force, updated. I believe this deck is top tier. Basically, this deck is a control deck, if you don't know what it does. Basically, you use cards like S-Force Chase and other back row to control your opponent, as well as the on-field effects of S-Force to, like I said, control your opponent. Now, if I sound a bit off, I'm getting over a cold flu. I've been feeling as well, so forgive me on that front. Basically, think Mech Knights. They're very similar to Mech Knights, that they have effects, that using effects depending on monsters in different columns that you control and what they control. So yeah, let me go over it. I'll teach you the whole deck. So your best starter in the monster department is Chiaramaru. So this is a level 2. Each of your opponent's monsters in the same column as one of your S-Force monsters can only target that monster for attack. So for example, if you have like a Gravitino and a Red Eyes in the same column, it can only attack that Gravitino. If there's another S-Force in a different column and you have Chio on the field, then it cannot attack that monster in a different column. So if you have like Platina on the left, it cannot attack that Platina. However, that rarely ever comes up. Don't even worry about it. Don't panic over it. Like I said, rarely ever comes up. Don't worry about it. That will only really ever come up like maybe if you have Bridgehead on the field, but not a big deal. The main thing is the starter effect. Now, there's a lot to know about Chio's starter effect. First of all, you banish one S-Force card from your hand, special summon one S-Force monster from your deck in defense position, except Chiara. You can only use each effect of Chiara once per turn. Now, the one thing you need to know about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! On a high level is there's a lot of PSCT, which means problem solving card text, and that's very apparent with Chiara here. So first of all, the banishing an S-Force card from your hand is a cost, and the effect is to summon out of the deck. Now, this is very important here because, first of all, if your opponent Veilers, because they have the opportunity to respond with a card effect right when you summon, if they activate Effect Veiler on summon, that is a huge misplay. You will see people do that a lot. Then you are able to chain because you are a quick effect. You can chain the cost and then still special summon out of the deck. The correct time that you have to Veil a Chio is you have to wait for them to vanish for cost. Now, keep in mind, this is a quick effect. So S-Force, you want to keep the deck, I feel like, around 23 cards, so you open Chase a lot more consistently, because that allows you to play around with Effect Veiler more. But if your opponent misplays on Effect Veiler, then they are going to get hard punished, because Chio will get the summon on the deck and they will take a -1. So that's a very common play. Warning point also does not work against Chiaramaru, because that has to be activated when the monster is summoned, which means at that point your opponent, you are able to change Chiaramaru's effect and summon on the deck. Book of Moon also doesn't work because it mentions this or that target does not designate whether it's face down. So if they book your Chiaramaru, you are still going to bounce it back to the hand, and then they are going to be able to special summon out of the deck. So you never want to book Chiaramaru. So this is very, very important that you need to know. So Chiara can get past a lot of different back rows, just like Ritual Beast can. A lot of ways it's back row, like Book of Moon, Warning Point. Ritual Beasts do a good job of dodging that as well. So like I said, they have to, any kind of disruption that you want to do on Chio has to be waited until the resolution of an effect, unless it's Book of Moon, because Book doesn't care. So when the effect tries to resolve after the cost has that been used, then you want to chain your like cards like Dynamishkus and your Effect Veilers. That's going to be the best time to disrupt them there. Okay. But Chio is really, really good. Summons any warrior out of the, any S-Force out of the deck, and you're going to get to see the when I describe the combos in this deck. And the combos aren't extremely intensive in this deck. It's pretty simple. But this deck does get big brain, as you need to know how to manage your resources well. Next, we have S-Force Lapsowell. This card is insanely good. First of all, on summon, it gets to special summon any S-Force from your graveyard, which is basically a monster reborn. Also, this is not a quick effect, this is not broken, and this does not apply on summon. It's not that broken, but it's still really good. You can banish one S-Force card from your hand, destroy all your opponent's monsters in the same columns as your S-Force monsters. And you can only use each effect of Lapsowell once per turn. This card is absolutely insane, because when you go on turn 3, you summon this, and you're going to have multiple S-Forces in your columns. It's going to be happening. And basically, if you have this on Gravitino, you're pretty much going to Raigeki your opponent's field and banish all their monsters. Doesn't care if it's face up or face down. You're generally going to have 3 S-Forces in those in your monster zones, and then you're just pretty much going to Raigeki their field. and banish all their monsters. So it's against something like Rocket, you can blow up all their monsters and banish them. And that's going to be really, really annoying for them to deal with because they're not going to get to float. So that's something really good. Or it's good against like any deck, like BLS. You can just like blow up their BLSs on turn 3 or something like that. Or just like any deck you want to Regeki. And like I said, the Monster Reborn effect, so good. Next, we have S-Force Platina. This is basically a Monster Reborn from the Banish pile. So when this is special summon, you can go, if it's special summon, I should say, because these cannot miss timing. You can target one S-Force monster in your Banish pile, special summon it. And then you can only use each effect of Platina once per turn. And also, other effect is that while an S-Force monster is in the same column, while Platina is on the field, all opponent's monsters in the same column as an S-Force monster you control loses 600 attack and defense. 600 attack, not defense. So basically, it attack reductions all your opponent's monsters in the same column as Platina. Now, this can be very annoying for your opponent because your S-Forces are not very weak, and them losing the buff mean them not being able to swing over your monsters, specifically Gravitino. But yeah, like I said, not the strongest of effects of the S-Forces, but as far as like what it does on the field to prevent your opponent from playing the game. But it's still pretty good, and it can come up a lot. But the main thing of Platina is it's your main one of your main engines to get started in a lot of combos, like summoning from the Banish pile and really being able to use that and getting 3 S-Forces on the field, either to leave 3 on the field or to make your justify, but overall she's really good for that, definitely. And the attack reduction is pretty solid too. Now, to get on to the most broken S-Force in the deck is S-Force Gravitino. This card is absolutely insane. It's a level 5 2000 attack monster. Each monster in the same column as your S-Force monsters, this is the column effect, are banished when it leaves the field. So think of this as like a big Sulfur Core Butea, but this card is absolutely ridiculous because it's like a Macrocosmos, the I-Fi on the field. So basically, if you go up against something like Live Twin and you go first, and they want to send their Live Twins to the graveyard, they're going to get banished. If you summon this on the field and they want to link off their rockets, they're going to get banished. If they want to, you get the idea. Basically, any Link deck is really going to suffer this, in Synchro decks as well. So something like Sardic would get all their things banished for every S-Force you have in their column. And once you get 3 on the field, you pretty much have Dimensional Shifter. Dimensional Fisher, right? Di-Fi. So basically, you're just banishing everything. But that's not the only thing that this thing does. On summon, adds 1 S-Force spell or trap for your deck to your hand. So you're going to summon this generally off your Platina, your Lapsowell, and your Chio. Sometimes your Razor, if you opened up weaker. But overall, this card is absolutely ridiculous. It searches your S-Force Chase, which is an insanely broken trap card for the archetype, and probably one of the most powerful trap cards in all of Duel Links. Or I should say, it's one of the most broken trap cards in all Duel Links. Maybe the most broken if it resolves at the right time. But overall, yeah, really, really good. Next, we have S-Force Razor, Edge Razor. Each monsters in the same column as an S-Force monster. Cannot be used as material for Link Summon of a Link 3 or higher monster. So basically, if you have 3 monsters in the zone, in all your zones, they can't Link 3. If you have 2 monsters, generally, because you're going to be pointing at EMZs first, you're also going to be locked down at Link 3 or higher. Now you're going to say, well, how does this apply? What decks make Link 3s? Well, think about it, right? Anything like Salamangreat cannot make the Girsu. That is a Link 3. You lock them out of that. And that's another thing for your Gravitino. Gravitino will banish all their Salamangrates. Really annoying, right? So that's something that comes up very, very often, right? And then, on top of that, you have the effect of Edge Racer, which has the other effect. If this card is normal special summon, you can special summon an S-Force monster from your hand in attack position. So this can special up your Gravitino, which is another way to get Gravitino on the field, or your Platina. This is also one of your main combos, because you will start out with like Razor, Platina, Gravitino, and then have like 3 monsters on the field to either make Justify, or just to like pass the 3 bodies and then use S-Force Chase. But yeah, really, really good stuff. Next, we have the best spell in the deck, and I know people are going to ask me, because this is the UR field spell, do I need 3 of this? Optimally, yes. Can you play the deck and get Cog without it? Yes. If you have less, you play 2 in a terraforming, you'll be fine. If ideally you want 3, if you run 2, probably cut the deck size down a bit. But overall, it's still a very, very good card. This card is insane for a lot of reasons. On summon, at activation, not on summon. On activation, it's Rhoda. It searches any S-Force monster for your deck to your hand. Also, column effect when your opponent declares an attack. And now, very important with PSCT, problem solving card text here. This second effect applies on declaration, not in battle step. So, like, if you were to activate your reinforced truth in the battle step, then this effect will not apply. It only applies on declaration, the second effect. So that means you want to summon it to that specific zone before your opponent were to declare an attack. When an opponent's monster declares an attack on your S-Force monster in the same column, you can activate this effect and protect your monster from battle once. And, yeah, that monster you control cannot be destroyed by battle. And then, you can only use each effect of Bridgehead once per turn. Now, what's very important is that it's an activated effect. You cannot use that more than once per turn, so you can't activate it more than once. Think of this as a Mech Knight Morningstar in some ways, how, you know how you have Morningstar in the field, and then they can't attack Mech Knights in the same column? They have to attack Mech Knights in that same column, excuse me. So, they would have to battle a Mech Knight in that same column. That works the same way with Bridgehead, but in reverse. That this Bridgehead will protect the monster in that same column, whereas Morningstar would protect the monster that is in a different column. So it's a bit different, but it's the same kind of concept behind it. Okay? And then terraforming to search that. Next, we have S-Force Showdown. This card is absolutely insane. Basically, Showdown special summons an S-Force from your hand. So basically, you know, if your opponent would activate Effect Veiler, or you think they have a Veiler, then you can extend with Showdown to summon a monster from your hand if you wanted to, but also this adds an S-Force from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a lot of utility. This is also really good because if you want to lock down all 3 columns and you only open the ability to end on Platina and Gravitino, then you can, on your turn, on your opponent's turn, activate Showdown and special summon a monster from there. And if you open this and you search your chase, your opponent's not going to know you open this, and then they end up summoning to a zone that you didn't lock down, and then suddenly they're committed into a play with Gravitino where they're going to get their stuff banished, and it's going to be problematic for them. And then they will lose the ability to make plays. So overall, really, really strong card at that. So definitely 1 copy of Showdown for sure. So definitely that. Also, one other thing is, again, and this comes up against something like Magic Key, where Bridgehead says you can only activate 1 Bridgehead per turn. Since it says you can only activate, meaning if they negate the activation, it does not say you can only use. Since it says you can only activate, if they were to use Magic Key Unlocking to negate the activation, or you go up against Rocket and you use Void Ogre Dragon, those both negate the activation of the card, so you can activate another copy of Bridgehead. So, very important to know about that. So anything that would negate the activation, you can use another copy of Bridgehead from the hand. Just to let you know that. Now, excuse me. We're blowing my nose. I have a bit of a cold, like I said before. Next, we play 3 Limit 3 traps. You don't have to play Compulse. You can play IDP as well. And you could also, I wouldn't play Crackdown because Crackdown really restricts you because Lost Wind could be actually a really interesting card in this deck because this deck can grind a lot to where Lost Wind can actually be quite interesting. I never tried it in the deck, but it's something that can be experimented with. Compulse is really good against U-Bell because you bounce back Kluger. If you don't have Gravitino, this is very important in the U-Bell matchup, but if you don't want to have Gravitino in the same column that Kluger's in, and the reason why is if you banish Kluger, it will float, but if you bounce Kluger back to the extra deck, it will not float because it is not being able to be identified in that location that it was sent back to. So something very, very important there. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second here. Let me cut this off and move the mic for a second. Sorry about that. I didn't want you guys to see me blowing my nose. But anyway, back to where I was saying, you don't want to have Kluger in the same monster zone. Because if you have that, then as Gravitino or any of your S-Forces, as any S-Forces while Gravitino's on the field, because Gravitino, like I said, if you have an S-Force in that column, so like if you have 2 S-Forces on the field, and Kluger's in one of the columns that your S-Forces are in, with Gravitino out, it's going to banish it. So ideally, if you know you're going up against Shubel, this is one of the reasons why I run a lower card count, because I want to open up Chase, then I'm not forced to summon Gravitino, and then I can bounce Kluger, which makes that matchup a lot harder for the opponent, because then they can't float off Kluger, and Neos Fusion will not protect them, and it becomes a lot less useful to summon Kluger than any other thing else. Okay, so that's something very important. That's why I tend to opt to play Compulse, because it's more outs to Uval, and I think Uval's one of the strongest decks right now. Now, on top of that, we're playing 2 copies of Reinforced Truth. This card is absolutely ridiculous, because on your opponent's turn, it summons Chio out of the deck. Now, another card you could play is S-Force Retroactive. I choose not to play it because I like to stick to a smaller card count. Basically, Retroactive allows you to do 2 things, which is Link Summon from the hand using it, and also to special summon an S-Force from your hand by returning an S-Force to your hand, but we're not playing Retroactive in the deck. This could summon Retroactive out of the deck too, but most of the time you're going to summon Chiara Maru. So, you activate Truth on your opponent's turn, and this is good too. Like, if they want to banish your Chio for some reason, then you can Truth into another Chio, and then, yeah, gain advantage that way. Very, very good. Now, the other card now the traps are both very strong in the deck. Chase is the strongest trap in the deck. This card is absolutely ridiculous. Chase allows you to target cards your opponent controls up to the number of S-Force cards you control with different names and return them to the hand. Now, you may say, okay, so this is a gigantic Compulse. That's obviously really good. Yes, but it gets better. Remember Gravitino? If you have 2 S-Forces or more in the same columns that your opponent does, those monsters are getting banished. Or even if you have 1, like if you have Gravitino and then they have 1 monster on their field, then they're going to get banished. That monster's going to get banished. All of a sudden, if you have 3 monsters on the field, that's a triple banish. Okay, does this card sound a lot more broken now? Yeah, I bet it does, right? Now, if you're banishing for 3, this card is absolutely insane. You're going to say, oh yeah, best trap in Duel Links. Think of it like IDP on steroids. But it gets better. Also, in the graveyard, you can banish this card if you would have banished an S-Force monster. So, for example, if you would have used Chio's effect, or activate the effect of Lapsoel, then you can banish Chase in the graveyard instead for that effect. So it helps you resource manage and commit to a bigger grind game. And you can only use each effect of Chase once per turn. You can't activate multiple Chase in the same turn. But very, very strong. It gives you value in the graveyard. It disrupts your opponent. It's very, very powerful. You definitely play this at 3, and I like it in a small card count. And the last trap is a 1-of, and this card I think is still very strong. It's S-Force Specimen. So basically, if your opponent controls a monster, you can target one of your S-Forces in your graveyard or banished pile, special summon that to the same column that they have. So very important, you want to make sure that if they're smart and they want to play around Specimen, they'll summon to the same column as the monster you control. But if you have an open column and they're going to swarm the field, you will be able to activate Specimen, and this will Monster Reborn like S-Force from your graveyard or your banished to that pile. It's really good to trigger both effects of Platina and Lapsoel, because if you have Lapsoel in the graveyard, you Monster Reborn the Lapsoel, and then that will Monster Reborn your Gravitino, and then you'll be able to get a search. Or you can Monster Reborn Platina, revive back when you're banished, so if you have banished Gravitino, you can do that as well. But Lapsoel is common to abuse with this. Also, it has one more effect in the graveyard, and that is, while in the graveyard, you can only use one. This one's a little bit different. You can only use one effect per turn. But while this card's in the graveyard, you can move an S-Force monster you control to a different zone that your opponent does. And a lot of times they'll forget this effect. So if you do it, then they may get messed up thinking that they're fine to make their play, and then you move over your Gravitino, and then suddenly they're not fine. Now the extra deck, we run Phoenix, Cerebus, 1 Underclock Taker, S-Force Justify. So this is your Link 3. This card is absolutely bonkers. It takes 3 monsters, including an S-Force monster. Basically, you cannot summon or send a monster into the zone this card points to. You can't kaiju. You're not going to be summoning generally to your opponent's monsters other than that. However, quick effect. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Negate that monster's effects to the end of the turn, so it's an interruption of your opponent's turn, basically like a breakthrough skill from a chalice. But this thing gets really insane when you use it offensively. Basically, you can also move that monster to a main monster zone that this card points to. So generally, unlike something like Longirasu, this points up, left, up, and up, right. Longirsu only points up and up, up, left, up and up, left, right? So that's something very, very important. So if you were to take a look at the arrows of something like Longirsu, right? For Orcus, long only points to up, left, right? So this, if you summon it in the left zone, wouldn't give you as much value, right? So you would say, oh, I would never summon this to the left zone because the left arrow points off. If you take a look at something like Berserker of the Tenyi, right? Berserker, oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh, why can't I break that? Yeah. So Berserker of the Tenyi, this points up, right? No. So you would say, okay, well, not that you really want your opponent to be summoning to those zones, but this one points up and up, right. However, this points up, up, left, up, right. So because of that, you can summon this to any of the right or left side that you want. But what's really good about this is that you can move it to any of the monster zones. You can negate their effect and move it to any of the monster zones. Points so you make it safe. So what's the point of that? I'm linking the monster. I'm getting to that. Now, at the start of the damage step, if this card attacks, you can banish all monsters this card points to. This card is absolutely insane. So basically, if you go on your turn and you link summon Justify on like turn 3, and they have like 2 BLSs on the field on turn 2, then you can move that other BLS to the zone and then potentially banish both. And if one of your opponents have one of their monsters on the corner zones and the other one in the corner zone, you generally move one in the corner zone or the EMC to one of the zones that this points to, and then you end up banishing 2 monsters, which is really, really, really good. And this does not target. The banish for Justify is a non-target banish. So something like, if they, like, for example, you might say, okay, where's that going to come up? Well, if your opponent is not paying attention to the zones, the effect to negate, the negation effect does target. So you can't, like, negate a Chaos Max or Saber Dance. However, if they put Leo Dancer in the EMC, then you're, well, not in the EMC, because then you're not going to be able to do that. But if they put Leo Dancer on, like, the left side or on the right side, and they don't throw it in the EMC, then, then they're giving you a column to use Justify with. So that's something you really need to pay attention to. So, like, if you're playing something like Lunalight, you're going to want to summon Leo Dancer, generally in a zone where it's going to be away from, like, the EMZ is generally safe because then you can't negate Leo Dancer and move it. But, so very important because then you can give them an out. Okay? Now, also, yeah, like I said, but they can also out, Saber Dancer can be outed though. Saber Dancer, they out with Lapse alone, but Leo Dancer, very difficult to out unless your opponent summons to Justify the wrong way, or Chaos Max for that matter. Okay, next we have Rostaliger, non-target pop. You barely make any of these, honestly, outside of your Justify and your Phoenix. You do make Phoenix and Unicorn sometimes, but everything else you just don't make. It's just not common. Pretty much you make Phoenix, Unicorn, Serb, and Justify most of the time. Okay, anyway, with that, onto some of the replays. I spent enough time. Yeah, and enjoy the replays as soon as the game decides to be cooperative. I can get to some of the replays. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. That is the replays. I know you saw one with IDP and that was like in retroactive, but that was me going back and forth in some of the older duels with different decks. But overall, this deck was clapping. We beat BLS. We didn't even use the IDP to win. I don't think we might have, but it didn't matter. Like Compulse could have won in that situation if there was like no poor or anything like that. So don't pay attention too much on like the limit threes and stuff like that, deciding any games. But overall, yeah, really strong deck. Yeah, if you like the video and you want to see a Climb the Cog, we're going to be doing a Climb the Cog with S-Force on Tuesday. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this video. I'll be on live Tuesday morning, different than my original nighttime that I come on. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, it's your boy, Sean Matrai, signing out. Peace. Bye, YouTube.